Welcome to the Layman's Seminary. In part 6 of How to Find an Exegetical Idea, we will be talking about considering the action words of a passage. The reason we want to look at the action words of a passage is because either God's doing the action, or possibly Satan, uh, or the believer or the character in the story is doing the action. And this is helpful for us because we trace what God's doing, and we trace what the human or the angel or whatever's in the passage is doing, and we should ask the question, okay, of course, when God does something, it's perfect, it's right, it's correct. But when man or an angel, a fallen angel, I mean, does something, then and it's not necessarily correct. And so we should ask questions like, what is the passage saying about that? Is there something in the passage that is evaluating the action? And that kind of helps us be able to draw principles, which we'll talk about later on. And so basically, what we want to do is we want to trace the action of the passage, because in order to apply this passage using the principles, we need to be able to see what kind of action is going on. Now, when I talk about action, I didn't use the word verb or verbals. Verbals are infinitives and participles, and some of that grammar stuff spooks people. But I've studied with people that didn't know much about English grammar or Greek or anything like that, but they understood the concept of action words or even being verbs. So we'll just look at this passage, which we've already done, but focus on the action words. So the brother of humble circumstances is to glory in his high position. And so this is a present sense because is present, and to glory is basically looks like an infinitive form. So something, it's basically saying that a person should presently glory or rejoice in the fact of their high position spiritually, even though things are not going the way they would like for them to go in their world at that time. As I mentioned before, this is written to the scattered Jewish Christians. And the rich man is the glory in his humiliation. So again, this is the present tense being used here. At least it looks that way in English. Because like flour and glass, he will pass away. So that's a future. That's a future promise going on. For the sun rises with a scorching wind and withers the grass. And so even though this is in present tense, it's kind of got proverbial language. In other words, we know about the sun rising and setting and storms and nature and all of that. And so it has that general thrust. And the flower falls off and beauty of its appearance is destroyed. So too the rich man in the midst of his pursuits will fade away. Okay, so we have the future promise once again. Now, what I did from here is I just kind of said two present conditions are possible: the glorification of God, because I'm relating it to the idea that if a person glories in their circumstance or situation, they've taken on that attitude of counting it all joy that the passage talks about, and the humiliation of man that is promised a future for the one who will not humble himself. In proverbial language, the reader is reminded of the promised future demise of the rich. So by looking at those action words, the action words are probably more important, probably the most important thing uh, in the outlines and stuff. So you could take what we've done here and you could write it into your exegetical outline that we done in the previous step, or the exegetical summary, and get an idea for that. And what you'll see is as you build on in these steps and apply these steps, you will be doing both. You will be looking at the tense, the action words. You will be looking at the logical flow, the relationships, the contrast, the comparisons. And so whenever you come to write out your summary of your explanation, your exegetical idea, all these are same terms, descriptive summary, you be able to pull those words to describe what your passage is doing. And in future videos, we will go into detail about processes and resources that one can use to be able to analyze the text. But right now, we're focusing on synthesis. Okay. Um, and that's it. But if I were just to quickly demonstrate something, how this relates to drawing principles and application, I could say something like this. I could say, um, uh, the spiritual people should glory in God's perspective, okay, and not in their current situation. And I could say that that either a person humbles themselves or they will be humiliated. And the rich who have the tendency to not depend on God are especially reminded of this danger. And so the application of that is that you may not be rich and you may not be totally poor, but regardless of whatever your financial, social, economic standing is, you are able to count it all joy. You're able to recognize that whether it's the adversity test or prosperity test, it's part of the refinement process to bring us to maturity, that and therefore we can count it all joy. So we can see how that works there. But this also helps us to recognize that whenever you are poor and don't have many things, a lot of times you're more content in some ways, unless you're coveting something. But the rich never have enough, or at least they feel that way. They don't feel satisfied. And of course, we're speaking in general principles, and so you bring that to the level of application, and you say this, that um, the comparison. I shouldn't be comparing myself to the rich and the poor, um, even in the church, but rather I should be asking the question: am I humble with what I have? Am I glorifying God with what I have? And do I have the right perspective concerning stewardship? Do I live in the present in such a way that reflects my faith and my responsibility to represent before God? And so we'll go into more detail in the next video about how we uh, start going from an exegetical outline to an expositional outline, or even a preaching teaching outline. So thank y'all very much. Please subscribe if you haven't. Share this with others. Hit the bell if you want notifications. And let us know what you think so that we can continue to improve in the content. God bless.